Welcome, Duke alumni and friends, to this session of the Duke Alumni Forever Learning Institute. This virtual series is designed to help you keep learning, stay connected, and grow your Duke network wherever you are. Today marks the third session in our new professional development series, Career Kickstart, where you will hear from both expert voices and the real-world experiences of fellow Duke alumni. I'm Ann Stevenson, Director of Professional Development with the Lifelong Learning Team in the Office of Alumni Engagement and Development, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us for Networking That Works, Building Connections with Purpose. This session is all about moving beyond collecting contacts to building authentic relationships that truly support your career goals. We're excited to have this conversation moderated by Trey Scott, CEO and General Partner at Folk Media Group. Trey will guide a candid discussion with our panel of recent alumni as they share the real networking challenges they've faced and how they have navigated them. Our panelists today are Ju Flanagan from 2023, Morgan McKenzie from 2023, and Harsh Sanghi from 2020. We will have a live interactive section where we want to hear real-world networking scenarios from you. So feel free to drop your examples in the chat as we go when you're prompted. Now, a bit about Trey. He's a Tony Award-winning producer, investor, and former Microsoft leader who's reinventing how entertainment is created and scaled. At Microsoft, he became one of the youngest managing directors in the company's history, leading a $1 billion portfolio and an 80-person team supporting Fortune 500 clients through digital transformation. His producing debut, A Strange Loop, won Broadway's highest honor in 2022. And since then, Trey has invested in and advised early-stage companies shaping the future of media, from AI and gaming to consumer products. He also serves on the boards of Duke University's Trinity College of Arts and Sciences, the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, and Govern for America. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator, Trey Scott, and our panelists, Drew, Morgan, and Harsh. Welcome to the Forever Learning Institute.
Thank you, Ann. Wow. And I got to bring you on the road with me. I need you in all my meetings, actually. Well, thank you all. First off, thank you to Ann and thank you to the team and to Duke for having us tonight. And for all of you who join on a Wednesday night, I promise it's going to be worth it. Our panelists are amazing. We're going to do some introductions with them. But one thing I want to cover before we move into it is just, we want this to be interactive, right? Not for the whole part, but definitely for the latter half. So we will open up the chat throughout the session, and the Duke team is actually going to monitor that, and Ann's going to help us with surfacing some of those questions so we can be able to answer them. And actually at the end of the session, we're going to really focus it back to the audience for real life examples where people can bring up, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what's happened, and the group can actually answer it, because we want this to be something that really feels fruitful, ideally from some of our conversations, but also let's have some real examples from you all. So don't be shy, and I'm not afraid to call anyone, so there you go. So let me first start by welcoming our panel and bringing them in. We have first Morgan McKenzie, who is Duke 2023. She is the founder of Simply Above Average and the Empowerment Hub. I will say, when I was looking at Morgan's background, let me tell you, the bio was doing what it needed to do. It was fantastic to see someone who, Morgan, looks like you've moved through tech, big company tech, Amazon. I won't be upset with you with the competition there from a Microsoft perspective, but I hear you. And now you're doing your own thing. And so I think I would love to hear a bit more about your background and let you do your introduction, but this sort of entrepreneur and intrapreneur, and how'd you navigate those two things?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. I'm Morgan McKenzie, born and raised in Harlem, New York. I studied economics while at Duke. While I was there, president of Black in Business, loved finding ways to help people learn how to network, connect with the greater community, and start to pinpoint where they wanted to land post-graduation. My journey started, honestly, back in elementary school. I thought I was going to be a fashion designer, made my first couple of pieces, went on the Today Show to talk about like the landscape of fashion for kids and how at the time I was already like 5'10", 8 years old and a little curvy. And I was 8. So we were talking about how the industry should, create size inclusive racks instead of like larger sizes being on one side of the like department store, put it all in one rack, make it easier for kids to shop. And the industry pivoted after the Today Show aired that segment. So that's like the background in fashion, leave it in your brain. Went to FIT, learned that I can't draw, I was in my Justin Bieber phase, and everyone in my FIT class was into indie and rock, and I felt very out of place. So I pivoted and made my lifelong goal to work at Goldman Sachs. And so I followed that dream while at Duke, and by my sophomore summer, I worked there. It was phenomenal. I learned a lot, made great connections through networking. Um, but ultimately realized I don't want to have my entire life set up at 20 years old. That felt outrageous. So Amazon AWS, that's their computer science. No. Their cloud computing division. They reached out to me and they offered me an internship. And I thought, amazing. I can pivot, get closer to this next level of life, still using my background experience in finance. I was investing in like Gen AI projects for different companies. But I was in tech, which felt like a move and it felt like I'm growing. So pivoted to tech. And while I was there, I realized I have this itch. I'm not sure what the itch is just yet, but I know that my life isn't in this role at AWS. And so I spoke to my mentors for months, telling them that I don't know if this team is the right fit. I would love to explore other options. And I explored, still couldn't feel my place there. And on a Monday, I had the idea for Simply Above Average. I was like, oh, I walk into work every day. I look at my colleague and I say, look at my freaking ankles because my pants never reach my ankles. Um, and I realized, okay, do some research. Every night I'd go home and I would like find brands that actually carried my size and inseam. After a while, I had 100 just sitting on my laptop. So I thought, what's better than just like having it on your laptop? Create one repository for everyone to enjoy. And that was like the beginning ideas of Simply Above Average. Um, on Tuesday, I was like, well, if you had like inseam and size filters, that's even better. So I created that version in my brain. But Monday had the idea. Wednesday, it was beating at me. And by Thursday night, I said, Friday, I'm taking the day off, flesh out the idea. And that's what I did. On that Friday, 5 days later, fleshed out the first iteration of the website, figured out if it could make money. Um, and I ultimately decided, okay, like I'm going to build Simply Above Average. I might need another month of work just to make sure that my family doesn't think I'm insane. But yeah, that was essentially my trajectory to this point of figuring out Simply Above Average. We launched in January of 2025. I had that moment in May of 2024. And yeah, in the first 10 months, we posted at New York Fashion Week. We built a team of 6. We've launched our MVP and we're just growing.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
We're going to get more into that, Morgan. I got some questions for you when it comes to this networking. Okay, so next we're going to go to Drew Flanagan, Drew and I had a brief call before this to sort of get to know each other, meet each other. And I was like, Drew, have I always known you? And he reminded me that no, that's not the case. And so my new friend Drew, who you work in iBanking now, right? You love how I use the acronym because I'm one of the people, Drew. But I feel like you had a very interesting Duke career as well, where you were heavily involved as a student as well. Got to meet a lot of different alumni at your time. Yeah. Just sort of walk me through both your background, Drew, but just also a little bit of from student now to Lazard. Like, how did we make that leap?
Yeah, no, thank you for the intro, Trey. And ditto, I feel like I've known you for forever as well. And then we're like, wait, we didn't even overlap on campus. So not factually possible, but great to meet you and no, excited to be here. I grew up in New Jersey, so not too far from New York City, where I am now. Uh, and when I went to Duke, I really loved it because I felt it was a place that is at the intersection of really strong intellectual rigor, but also really good school spirit, social connection. And so I definitely felt that when I got on campus. And that, to me, inspired me to want to be involved, help be a part of this sort of secret sauce, this right mix that Duke does really well. Um, I served as CFO of Duke Student Government my first year, so got to work with, all 400 clubs on campus, manage a $2 million budget, oversee a 35-person team, get to know Duke as an institution, right? Duke's one of the largest private employers in North Carolina. And so very complicated place, a lot of different silos, teams working together, all toward, a shared common goal. And that sort of, made me excited as I got to learn more and just was meeting so many people, whether it be from the health system to the research enterprise to other facets of the university. That got me super excited to serve as class president my senior year and as an undergraduate representative on the board of trustees, which was a really insightful look into how, Duke from sort of the broad board strategic level really makes decisions. And I think from those experiences, I thought and I reflected a little bit, what are the parts of these experiences, these roles, these people that I've met that make me really excited? And how can I maybe channel that into a career? And so, as I was going along my Duke journey, I actually interned at Toys R Us the summer after my freshman year, and they had just emerged from bankruptcy. And so that was really interesting to be, partnering with, working with, learning from a management team, and one that was actually in transition. It wasn't, the all-star crew. The retail model had changed. Just so much disruption in that industry. People were starting to order toys online more. And it's really when the tide goes out, right, that there's a ton to learn. And so I felt like after that summer and having had a lot of Duke experiences, I really sort of understood what we say in sort of the investment banking world, the management team perspective, right? The people that are leading a company, how they think about a business. The perspective I wanted to get, though, was the other way. How does sort of investors, stakeholders, whether at Duke that includes alumni, students, parents, in the business world, it's shareholders, partners, et cetera. And so I wanted to get that outside in perspective. And so I did what is sell side equity research, and that is independent companies that write research reports on publicly traded companies. And that's really helpful for investors to understand how a company is doing and all these sorts of things. And that gave me the real outside in. What are the key metrics that outside stakeholders look for to define success, to define growth? And I think that sort of dual experience made me really excited to intern in investment banking, where I am now in our consumer retail team, because I feel that my role really allows me to be at the intersection of those ideas. We work with clients on, for those that aren't familiar with investment banking, essentially their sort of most important strategic decisions. That could be merging with another company, that could be acquiring a smaller company, that could be taking part of their company that they have already and spinning it out. Or that could be companies that aren't doing so well, like Toys R Us, and saying, how can we think about things differently, right? Maybe we refinance your debt. Maybe we sell a piece. Maybe we, look at other strategic options to sort of make things better on a go forward basis here. And so I think my time at Duke, really allowed me to meet different types of people and get different types of perspectives from different stakeholders. And that I think allowed me to sort of land on investment banking as something that I'm excited about as sort of a next step and have really enjoyed as my first job.
Fantastic. All right, we're gonna have some more questions. And again, before I hand over to Harsh, I want everyone to know, I wanted everyone to go through their background so you can hear how different each of us are, right? And where we started, where we are, where we're going, so that everyone on the call in the audience can really hopefully relate to some of the journeys, even if it's a part of it, right? So Harsh Sangi, I'm going to turn to you, who one is our only panelist who's currently in school, back in school. He couldn't get enough. That's what he told me. So he's over at Harvard Business School. And
He's at the Duke of the North, we call it,
the Duke of the North. That's right. You're right, Drew. He couldn't get enough of Duke, so he said, bring it up to Boston. And Harsh, I also saw that you're an advisor to a company you helped start, NanoWeave, right? I feel like, and I could be wrong, but Harsh, you have a science, it gives science engineering, but now we're at business school. So that's okay. We can go to business school too. I'm just trying to understand. Help me make the leap between engineering, but then deep science, NanoWeave. Now we're at business school.
Yeah, happy to. Also, it's really funny, but I think Duke might be the most represented school at HBS. Like we have a WhatsApp, we meet every like month. I think March Madness is gonna be great. So this is me and like 30 other Dukies my year who couldn't get enough of school and made it back. But yeah, maybe for some background. So I grew up in India. For me personally, I knew very early on that I wanted to work on climate and energy. Um, Climate change is a big problem, and like since I was like in middle school, I'd kind of been working on it. Um, Knew that's kind of where I wanted to focus all my energy. Uh, no pun intended. And I came to Duke because Duke is like one of the best places to work on this. Had a great time. Like I was president of the Energy Club, did the Smart Home Club, the debate team, studied mechanical engineering. So the goal was, okay, let's go build new solutions. And one of my summers, I worked as an engineer, spent a lot of time working on this like control device for like the whole summer. And for me personally, the insight there was I love engineering, but like as an engineer, very often you're just working on one thing for months and months. And I wanted to be closer to the decision makers and to the business side of things. So I wanted to actually go in there and make decisions and make changes that would have bigger effects and could help scale technologies. And so as someone, and I'm sure a lot of other students in the same boat, it's like you have no idea what you want to do. You want to do something businessy, you go to consulting. So I ended up joining McKinsey and spent 3 years in the New York office, working on energy, industrials, climate tech. Um, I think consulting for me was just a really good way to learn how big companies are making decisions, how are they allocating capital, when they try new technologies, what are the challenges they have, what works, what doesn't work. So it was like industry 101 for 3 years. And you kind of just see how big things get done at scale. Um, you also learn how to make really good pitch decks, which you're going to have to keep making all throughout life. So it's a good skill to have. Um, After McKinsey, like near the tail end of McKinsey, a lot of my work was with startups. So I was in our climate tech practice, helping startups and advising them. And I think similar to what Morgan mentioned, like I had this itch where I was like, cool, like I can do this, right? Like I should be doing this. Why am I not actually doing the building and just doing the advising? Um, so got a job at a venture studio, which I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of, but we kind of incubate ideas. So like if they're really smart people working on interesting things, we help take an idea to a real company and then we invest in it and help scale it and kind of get it off the ground. So uh, I was in London for 2 years doing that, spent a bunch of time helping incubate companies and invest in them and spin them out. And then one of the companies I was spending a lot of time with, which Dre talked about, NanoWeave, I joined them for a year as a co-founder and just helped them get it off the ground, closed our fundraise round, got our early customers, set up a lot of the initial operations. And so kind of scratched the building itch and the founder itch. And as I was going through this process of like getting new technologies off the ground, for me, the insight there was it's cool to build new companies and it's cool to get technologies off the ground, but climate change is happening now. Like it's getting bad as we speak. I'm sure everyone's been following the floods and the forest fires, um, and we don't have time to waste. So what I want to do now is like help scale technologies that are already at some level of maturity. And how do you get them to mega scale, right? So get them to every industry, every geography, and do more of the scale up stuff instead of the startup stuff. And so also wanted a 2 year vacation, but figured, HBS is a good way to just kind of hang around for 2 years and then transition more to the scale up side of things.
Fantastic. Harsh, what I find interesting about your background is I think if I look at your resume on paper, at least when I was a student, it looks like a very what they would call typical Duke resume. But your interest and focus, I think, is incredibly interesting to me and really actually hyper focused in a way, right? So I think what I love about your background, Harsh, is it shows that you can apply what they used to call the Duke playbook, right? Which is like go to management consulting. You're doing some venture studios a little bit off the beaten path, but I think like an idea like I'm then going to go work with other teams and then come back and circle back to get my MBA. But it also shows you can go that route while having a diverse set of interests, which I think is really cool. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump into it. We're going to jump to some questions for the panelists. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you direct questions, but also I would like this to be discussion based so we can come off mute and do the thing. The other piece to this for the audience is a couple of key takeaways, things that I believe wholeheartedly about networking that you should know that will come out in this, which is number one, I think it's important out of this session, we get on the same page of what is and what isn't networking, right? If you're going to ask me for a favor, and I mentioned this to Drew when we were talking, we were laughing about sort of like what is and what isn't networking. If you're going to ask me for a favor, that's okay, but that's not networking. It's a favor, and that's fine. Just ask. If you do a lot of small talk before you ask me for that favor, that's a weird way to ask for a favor, but that's not networking either. And so what we want to kind of discuss in this is like what is and what isn't really networking. The second thing is what's the secret unlock when you do networking correctly, right? Like what really starts to like truly be something more than just I get a job, right? What are you really unlocking when you are doing networking correctly? And then lastly, we'll have some real takeaways, right? Some sort of pretty tangible things, whether that's LinkedIn DMs, some other pieces that people do. And of course, some things that we say sort of the do nots. In the chat, please put in there anything that is really specific you would love to cover on here or any questions you have when you're asking people about networking. So the first part we're going to talk a little bit about is sort of this idea of humanizing networking through authentic stories, right? This idea of like, what is authentic? How do you actually connect to people? Morgan, I'm going to start with you. I'm assuming you did some fundraising for Simply Above Average, or at least have been talking to investors. And so I'm sort of curious to how you bring a human connection when you, one, need money from people. Like it's not, we're not like unclear of what the transaction is. It's I'm need some money. So how do we actually have that conversation? I'm sort of curious to how you look at networking in an authentic way when it's a known thing in the room, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Backstory, when I was at Duke, I loved networking. I thought it was super fun. I was into it. Then I went through this crisis of, is any of this authentic? Like, I feel weird. I know I've been doing this for years already, but I hit this point of I'm changing as a person, and are my interactions and friendships real, or are we all kind of seeing each other as a transaction, and do we actually have this like web that I thought we created? So I haven't fully raised yet. We're launching soon, but I say that because a lot of fundraising is networking and soft conversations to get people ready for the in your face direct ask. And so I think, how do you do it without it? How do you do it? Honestly, dinners. I really love building relationships. And I think with my core group of friends, family, network, it's asking, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what we've done. Here's the strategy that I have in mind. I would love your thoughts. And I feel like that framework of I would love your thoughts on next steps, like here's what I have to bring to the table, would love your sauce on top of it, has opened the door to future conversations, as well as like the early investors who are like, oh, whenever you open the round, I would love a seat at the table. And so what does that look like in practice? I mean, one good example, I have a few friends that are from Duke. They love just grabbing a dinner. We're not the closest of friends. We're like the third degree. Like we used to see each other every now and then at school, but we keep in touch on social media and we know that our industries align in some way. So we have dinner, and our dinners aren't just, oh my God, how are you? We're actually getting into the nitty gritty of our lives and our careers, the goals. I have some friends in marketing. And with them, I'll actually just tell them our strategy, get their like honest thoughts on how we're building the channels that we're going down. I have some friends with specific niches in like SEO, and I'm brand new to all of that. And I'm self-teaching myself everything. So it's like, well, here's how I'm approaching SEO through like alt text and blogs.
Now, Morgan, 1 second. I want to go back to one thing and I want to ask you about this.
Yeah, please
You
do.
mentioned so you're right now, it sounds like the way you're navigating is I'm having conversations with people without an ask.
Yeah.
Explicit ask. And
Yeah.
so then how many conversations do you have to have until the ask comes?
Great question. Okay, let me think back. How many questions till the ask? I think it's less about how many conversations for me right now. It's more of, is the deck where I want it to be in order to officially open this round? Less of a perfectionism, more of the company still evolving in a way that I really enjoy, and I think is more compelling for the investors we're targeting. We're going the unconventional route and are hopefully leading our cap table with athletes, because one of the pieces of the company beyond helping tall people find clothes that fit is this whole athlete sponsorship industry. And so we style professional athletes. We signed our first NFL player this summer, and beyond just styling them, we help with their image curation. So if you have a rookie like Cooper Flag, helping him through his style show up as a leader on and off the court. And in addition to that, we help them partner with different fashion houses. So the same way the F1 drivers have like watch deals, and in interviews they'll like slightly go like this or just show their watches off a little bit. Yeah, that's like a multi-million-dollar deal. And what we're angling ourselves to do is to facilitate those deals for WNBA, NBA players. One of our goals is to also work with the F1 Academy, which is the like woman version of F1. And
Mhm.
so I say that because these are newer developments. Like they were part of the initial plan, but the way that we're able to communicate it and market it is what we're refining right now. So we're
So for
still,
you,
yeah,
sorry, I was just gonna say for you, it sounds like there may not be an explicit ask, but there's still intention by all your meetings. You're like,
there's intention.
I'm
Yeah.
here to share what I'm doing, what I'm working on, so that when I go to ask you, we're not cold turkey. We know where we're at.
Yes. And I feel like a lot of investors, there's a lot of, I feel like like fundraising happens in phases. First phase is the soft, here's my pitch. Yes, you know that you are on the potential list of investors, and more than that, like my immediate circle is really valuable with the advice that they give, as well as their network is connected to several other investors. And so by buying in that first layer, I'm creating basically 10 people who will market the company who currently are, and they'll call me and go, Morgan, guess who I just met? I think this would be a great new investor. They're interested to come in at this amount. And it's just like adding the list. So when it's ready, well, when we're ready to officially launch this round, we have a list ready to go of investors who are excited, who understand the vision, and they're also finding people who also want to be a part of it.
I think it's a great parallel because I think in fundraising in general is a networking game. And so I think it's a great parallel for just in general, how do you network and what the journey you're on, Morgan. So that's why the key takeaway for the audience, what I want you to hear is it takes multiple touch points to usually get to a big ask. And you need to know what those touch points are going to be beforehand. So it's something
Yeah.
Morgan already understands. And it's not, I don't want to put words in mouth, but Morgan, some of it was sharing what I'm working on today and sharing where I'm going in the future. So it seems to be a bit of a mix. Harsh, for you, you're in business school. Everyone says you go to business school for the network. You only go to certain business schools, apparently. That's what the streets say. I don't say it. For the network. How do you create actual connections when we're we're in class, we're on vacation, we're trying to build friendships, but also at the end of the day, I'm here for the network. So what does it actually look like in real life and business school and how you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe like one comment before I get into that. I think like one thing about networking, right? Like it's really important like when you have asks and like when you want to do things. But even if you're like looking for a job, one of the things I've kind of found over the last few years of being in the industry is the coolest jobs, the most interesting jobs are never on a job portal. Um, you're not applying to them, they don't exist, there's no resume drop, there's no cover letter. And so you want to know people who are doing interesting things just because that gets you your next role and that gets you your next promotion or gets you your next kind of interesting startup that you want to join. And so it's really important to network or like have people you know and you like because that is where the rest of your career is going to be built. Like you might apply to, a bank or like a McKinsey for your first job, but most of your jobs after that are not going to be applications that you're doing on a portal. And so I think that's kind of one of the
Hold on,
reasons
hold
it's
on, hold on, hold on. We got to make sure everyone's picking up on that. Is a mentor give me the same thing, which is after your first few jobs, you want your next jobs to not be through an application. So Harsh, what you're getting at is if that's going to be the truth, then you need to find a bunch of people who you think will one day come to touch. But
Mhm.
I feel like Harsh, one thing I've heard before is that usually people get your job doesn't come from the person you know, it's usually someone that they know or a second or third degree connection, right? So keep going where you're at, but I'm sort of curious to how you be intentional with that when who's to say that who's going to be the person to give you the job.
Yeah, I think that's true. And like you probably don't know, right? Like you don't know who's it gonna be, but I've had instances where a friend's connecting me with another friend who's then connecting me with another friend, and then you like end up doing something with them. So the idea is you can control who you know, and then hopefully that leads to offshoots that are interesting. And that's not entirely predictable from day one. Um, but coming back from the detour, so I think to your original question, um, business school, a lot of your network is long term. So, like, I'm getting to know my classmates who are my peers really well. And a lot of those are just friendships, right? So you go to dinners together, you go on trips together, you end up meeting people who like you and you like them. And these are networks you're investing in, not for the next 1 or 2 years, but the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so there's like that aspect, which is it's not even networking, it's friendship. And business school is like friendship making on steroids. You're making like 500 new friends over 2 years. I think, as Morgan mentioned, not all of them will be friends you're hanging out with every day, but you'll have circles of people you see at reunions, people you see once a year, once a month, and then your core group that you see like maybe every week. So you're going to have concentric circles of friends, but business school is making a bunch of peers and friends who are going to be useful in the long term. Um, there's the other kind of networking, which is almost networking with people who are 5 or 10 years further along in their careers from where you are, right? And so that's like MDs at banks or partners at VC funds or people at big tech companies or other kind of Fortune 500s, whoever it is. But these are people who are maybe 10, 15 years older than you. Um, School is a great time to reach out to people. So when you're in school, whether it's undergrad or grad school, people are very receptive to chatting with you. And so one of the things you can do as a student is find alumni who you think are doing interesting work and reach out to them. And it could be as simple as just, hey, very interested in what you're doing. My background is XYZ, would love to learn more about it. It doesn't have to be for a job. It could truly just be something you're trying to learn more about, you're trying to get advice on. And so that's kind of how you start building those relationships. I think the way to sustain those relationships once you've reached out to someone and talked to someone is don't think of it as networking, but think of it as creating value. So it's like someone who's a MD at Goldman Sachs, they can get you a job. So it's very obvious how they can create value for you. But what I think a lot of people forget about is you can create value for them, right? They want to know what's happening on campus. They're not keeping on top of all the news or all the interesting updates in their industry. Um, they might also need introductions to other cool students who they might want to talk to. So think of it as like anyone you meet, can you help them in like what their goals are? And you're not just extracting value, but you're actively trying to give something back and be useful. And even as an undergrad who is a freshman, there are many ways you can be useful. So it's not just because you're a freshman doesn't mean you can't create value. You'd be surprised by how many people who are 10 years out of undergrad just want to know what's happening at Duke, just want to
Yeah.
know how things are going. And I think even that is super valuable.
I think that's great points, Harsh. You also brought up two things that I would underscore that I often tell people. Number one, the best time to look for a job or even to network is when you don't actually need a job or you don't actually need anything. And Morgan was getting into that, the same thing, which is like, I don't have an ask yet. It's coming one of these days. But the best time, to Harsh's point, the best time to be reaching out when he's in school, right? Like, this is a great time to be reaching out to people, or you're currently employed with an employer you enjoy. That's a great time to be reaching out to people because you don't have to hide your hand around an ask. There is none. But I am sort of building my network, and it's a great way to kind of sort of let out the tension that there's no secret ask here. The second thing you mentioned, Hart, I think is important is I tell people you want to network up, which is like sort of to your point, people who are ahead of you in their career, the managing directors, the other entrepreneurs who have successful exits, things like that. But you also want to be, I think when you get to be about 5 years out, but you can start as early as possible, but definitely by 5 years out of school, you need to start networking to the side because those are actually going to be the people who go from Goldman Sachs, Amazon to doing their own thing, or from Toys R Us to here. And Harsh is now at HBS. So you have other folks who are your peers who have changed jobs and expanded their career. And when you network to the side, it is eventually those people who, as you get older, move into the big positions, right? And I recently had a Duke alum call me who's the right hand of a very famous soccer player and was like, hey, we have a project. Can we collaborate on something? And I was like, I haven't talked to you since graduation. And it was amazing. But to talk about networking to the side, right? Neither of us would have ever thought we'd end up sort of at a spot where our careers start to overlap. Drew, help me understand too how you network with people. We talk about humanizing. How do you network with someone you don't like?
You don't like.
Like we're not vibing. It feels hard. This is tough.
Yeah.
Have a natural connection point. Did
Right.
Duke?
Yeah. A few things. One, I think, you always want to be friendly, professional, and whatnot. But also not every, I think I love when I get a lot of inbounds in my role, in my industry in particular. Networking is sort of the big entry point for getting jobs. And
Investment banking, you mean, Drew?
yes. And a lot of times people put, a call on my calendar for an hour, right? And it's like, well, does it need to be? So I know when I'm networking and say it's not going well, maybe it just needs to be a 15-minute conversation, right? And then it's, you know what? Those were all my questions. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And send the follow-up email, which is another good, add to your list, try a good networking best practices. And then when you reach out for the follow-up in 6 months or a year, reply from that thank you email to keep people sort of on the same thread, show that you sort of did the work, if you will. Um, but I think you keep it professional. You should definitely try, right, to find points of connection. Maybe sort of go down a different avenue. Maybe sometimes people get friendlier when you mention, oh hey, you know Morgan too, right? You'll be shocked how many times people are like, oh yeah, yeah, I do. And then, they're like, oh, now this person knows me. I'm on the record a little bit more. So those are some like practical strategies. But don't feel like you need to move mountains. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it's not great. And if you just keep it short, sweet, polite, I always think of it as it doesn't close that door, right? And maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe they'll never reach out to you again. But the door is not really closed in terms of being like, you know what, you did suck. Bye, thank you. So.
And do you think of that as a successful outreach in that case, Drew? If, hey, we just didn't vibe, or we had a great conversation, and sort of we don't pick it up from there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way I think about network generally is you're almost like it's building blocks, right? And you never really know. It's kind of like at Duke when they say, one of the benefits of a liberal arts education is you don't know what, the workforce of tomorrow looks like, what the job requirements of tomorrow look like. You almost don't know who is going to be helpful at what turn. To your point about, networking at your level, right? Everyone goes and takes these different paths. And so I think, yeah, as long as you sort of build out, you just never know. I mean, and it could be something as simple as, I reach out to Harsh and he sees that Morgan's a mutual on LinkedIn of mine. That subconsciously is in the back of his mind when we speak. Oh, Drew knows Morgan. Whether I know Morgan, whether Morgan's my best friend or we are just LinkedIn friends, um, it just helps to contextualize you when you go and meet someone new.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So on the tactical sort of piece, like getting some real struggles and some tactical advice where Drew was headed. Morgan, I guess help me understand what happens if you do a bunch of outreach, like you reach out to a ton of people, or actually, let me ask you this before I do that. Number one, do you think it's okay that people blast out to a whole bunch of people when you're trying to build your network? Like, is it a volume game? Should you be really direct? And then if you don't hear back from folks, then what?
Yeah. So personally, I don't love the volume game at first. I mean, I think you have to know your own personality. Yes, I'm extroverted, but I do pour a lot of energy into my relationships, and I think that's why they all have a pretty nice high quality to them. And so I think be intentional about why you're speaking to someone. It's not like you're doing it for like a transaction, but because you think they're interesting, because there's something going on in their lives that you want to learn a bit more about. I mean, you don't have to pour your heart and soul into that interaction, but be present enough. And so I think with your normal networking, I think maybe create a rule of thumb of like, I want to meet like 5 new people this quarter. Find some like 5 people to set up some calls with. I think fundraising is a bit different where it is it's a bit more of a volume game, but for traditional networking, for job life, be a bit more intentional. Go outside, see who you meet while you're out. And then from there, like follow up. Hi, it was lovely meeting you. Would love to grab dinner soon and keep that relationship moving forward. And I think that speaks more to my industry, I think, than traditional IB or something like even venture, honestly. But and then the next note, volume, and then the next part of that was,
If you don't hear back, like then what?
oh,
Like,
you're fine. Yeah, I think the greatest part of building a company is rejection is what it is, and you learn something from every single one. Like for instance, I reached out to my brother he ghosts me all the time.
Yeah.
Like all the time. He's really great at humbling me. But on a larger note, like there have been like serious mentors from the past that we lost touch and I wanted to like reconnect. Silence. That will happen. It's not the end of the world. It's not a bad thing. It's just how it goes. But get into like a cycle of knowing, like, if you're not connecting right now, it's not the end of the world. Your paths just aren't aligning at the moment, but maybe in the future they will again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's great advice. I get a lot of outreach, and I'm terrible at emails at this poor team.
exactly. And I
Like,
have this perspective because I went through like a good year period of not being as responsive. And now that I'm back, I'm like, you know what? I get it. I get it.
like
It happens to the best of us.
Harsh, one thing for you, just on the practical side to Morgan's point, like about outreach. I'm curious, you graduated at the top of the middle pandemic, right? I'm trying to think about it. So it would have been the
Yep.
next, no, right as it all
Right
happened.
as it started. Yeah.
And I just feel like for a lot of people, there's still a bit of a disconnect. Folks who had to kind of learn networking in real time during a remote time. So just like help me understand when it comes to outreach, what are the different techniques? Of course, there's a LinkedIn DM, but how else are we making connections?
Yeah. And that's a great question. Like, COVID was really weird for I think everyone who was graduating around the same time. Um, it was interesting. Like when we graduated, we missed out on a lot of the in-person stuff, but you could make up with online networking and LinkedIn DM. So I think there's always like an opportunity for you to like make the best of the situation. But except for all the online, email, LinkedIn DMs, going to events is an amazing way to meet people. So when I was in New York, I went to a bunch of climate events, um, made friends who I'm actually like one of my best friends was someone I met at a climate event. And we just like really got along. He's like an investor. I was at that point at McKinsey. We got along really well. Um, and it's very low stakes, right? You're at a happy hour or you're at a talk, you're just chatting. You could chat about football, you could chat about like soccer, you can talk about art. Like it's not even like intense enough, like, hey, let me bombard you with questions. It's just very friendly and very low stakes, where you can go around and like talk to 20 people. And at the end of it, you might find 3 or 4 people you really like. And all of that is in like a 1 hour time span. So going to in-person events and just putting yourself out there, especially if you're in a big city, right? Like any city over like 100,000 people, you're having a lot of events and you can like go and show up and put yourself out there and actually get a lot of stronger connections and maybe even like less amount of time spent than like doing outreach and Zoom calls.
Drew, do you think that you're an introvert or extrovert?
I would say I'm an extrovert, but I definitely like my alone time. And it, it's interesting because I actually do. That's the definition, right? Where do you recharge, or some people's definition? I definitely recharge hanging out with friends and bonding with people. But I still need the balance of me being alone almost to think. Sometimes it's hard to think when you're constantly on or talking to people. And sometimes I notice that when I'm alone, you're thinking about how situations may play out or running things in your head, right? And I think that's an important part of sort of the process as well.
Yeah. Well, I asked it because like Harsh, you gave great examples of putting yourself out there. I am actually, and a lot of people are usually shocked. I am actually an introvert, and I find that but I perform being extroverted, and I used to tell people, I think, because I think Harsh, you giving the exact, which is why I asked you, Drew. Morgan mentioned she was an extrovert. I was sort of curious because I think Harsh's advice is a really good one, and one everyone kind of has to take, which is put yourself out there. Like you got to just willing to take some risk. But what I used to do, I used to do two tricks. One, when I go out to things and I had to put myself out there, I'm not a shy person, but I am introverted. But I would say to myself, I'm gonna meet 5 people. Come hell or high water, I'm meeting 5 people. And I would go up to Morgan. I say, Morgan, I'm meeting 5 people tonight, and you want to?
Yeah, it
Uh,
works
and it works,
every
right?
time.
But to your point, where you got to know your personality. For me, that works for my personality. So I think it's like finding the technique that you have to just sort of like be vulnerable.
Hmm.
And what does that actually look like? And for every person, it's going to look a little different. So I'm sort of, I feel like what I want to also take away too is like networking to me is not for extroverts only, right? Because we all got to network. And I think instead, it really, from an introverted perspective, I tell myself all the time, like I prepare myself for what is a networking event. And that is not, it's just that, you know, I don't go out the night before and I do my own thing and I make sure I'm in my head's in the game so that I'm having genuine connections. The other thing I used to do that I think is really important, and I just to give a bit of tactical advice, in order to network and build connection really easily, you need to be interesting or interested. So pick a struggle. You can't have both. You can't be boring and don't know nothing. And so I'm curious to the panel, but one thing I used to do is I used to listen to, when I first started at Microsoft, a lot of my clients were sports fans. And I wasn't a big sports guy at the time. And I used to listen to Bill Simmons and his podcast. And I would repeat whatever Bill Simmons said. Like if he was like, we love Jimmy Butler, I was like, I love Jimmy Butler.
I love him. Yeah.
I love Jimmy Butler. And I would go to meetings and simply repeat. But it was what it really was is that Bill Simmons covered a lot of topics. And so when I would be in conversations, I was genuinely interested in what people had to say about these topics because I heard about them. I didn't know a lot, but I knew a lot about a little bit. No, a little bit about a lot. Yes. And so I'm curious as we kind of, before we transition to audience questions, like what are the small sort of little tactical, easy wins that you all do when it comes to networking, or tips and tricks that you really have up your sleeve when you think about what real networking, like real life networking or digital strategies, if you have those too. That's for anyone.
Yeah. I guess one that I'd start with is don't feel like you need to go like 10 steps ahead right away. I think one example where that plays out is if you're networking with a consultancy or a bank or a corporation, maybe sort of start with networking someone your own age or someone, a level or two lower. Get to know the lay of the land, get sort of the silly questions out of the way, and kind of like you would do easy problems in a math class and then do harder ones and do advanced, like don't go to like the top dog right away. And save that and almost do the work. And sometimes, making those intermediary connections, they help you get there, right? Passing you along the chain. So that's sort of one table stakes item.
That's great, Drew.
I think I can hop in. I think if you're in the midst of a pivot, like I was at the start of this year and last year, I moved from Seattle back to New York and I had this vision of starting a fashion company, but I didn't have a background in fashion, nor did I have a lot of friends in the arts. So I became a patron of the New York City Ballet and the Whitney because they had an event schedule.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just fun. My favorite part of Duke was the event schedule. Like frats and organizations would have events every single week. And it was a great way to like keep friends in rotation, see more people. And I wanted to recreate that back in New York City. And so I say that because if you're in the midst of a big pivot, try one step. Like join a new organization, maybe join a dance class if you want to like learn more about dance or that part of the arts, but figure out the industry that you're looking to pivot into. And if you're not sure just yet, like I used to write out all of my niche interests on like a post-it and I would put it on my wall so I could move things around to see like, okay, like I don't know exactly what the future will hold, but I know that I love sports and I know that I love fashion and here are some of the qualities that I enjoy and just a very literal way to see what I like, how it can materialize into a job in the future. Yeah, it was really cool. But I think very tactfully, like if you are pivoting, figure out the first step into like getting into that community, even in terms of like opening that part of your brain to be creative in an artsy way. Yeah, meet some art friends. Go to art galleries on Thursdays. They're free. It's a great way to mingle, see art, hear how people are discussing it. And over time, like you'll actually become an art person. You won't feel like an imposter. That'll truly be your tribe, your community, and you'll figure out what your next steps are.
That's fantastic. Harsh, what you got?
I think that was great. Maybe like the only thing I'd add is like be yourself and find your people. So like you might like sports, you might hate sports, right? You might be very extroverted, you might be introverted. Like you might be very good at banter, you might be a bit awkward, like whatever it is that you are, every organization has like hundreds of people and everyone's different. And so if you're networking or talking to someone and like there just isn't the vibe, go to the next person, right? Find as you talk to more people, you will find someone you kind of gel along with better, and like you guys just have better kind of cohesion and energy. So you don't have to be friends with everyone. You don't need to meet everyone. Whoever you end up meeting and you like and you guys get along with, that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's great. What was it? Find your people?
I guess I just made that up, but like be yourself and find your people.
When you see it on the
Uh,
t-shirt, I'll give you credit, I promise.
Yeah.
Um, fantastic. Okay, well, we have a few minutes left. I would love to turn it over to the audience. If you have any questions, put them in the chat, or also, I didn't say this to Ann and them, but I was like, you can also come off mute. You can do that too. Or maybe Duke tells me you can't, but well, I would like you to.
Yes, we will give the audience that power, Trey. Thanks so much.
Amazing.
All right, is anybody going to be brave this evening and ask a question? If not, we can certainly pose a scenario forward. Giving you all a second to think about it.
Sure, I'll ask a question.
All right, go for it.
As I find myself potentially in the midst of a change, will depend on what Duke decides come 2 weeks from now.
Mhm.
Yeah, how do you deal with layoffs or having to pivot to a new potentially new organization or new fields? Like I've switched fields 3 or 4 times and might be having to switch fields again.
Yep. I'll actually take this one, and folks can jump in as well. I think that was Ann, right? Or Anna, excuse
Anna,
me.
yep.
And so, two things. Number one, when it comes to work transition from a layoff perspective, I think in a post-COVID world, it has been incredibly normalized that we have to all make a bunch of transitions that are out of our hands. And I think prior to COVID, I would actually say that there was a lot more sort of taboo of like, do I say it? Can I mention it? How do I work to that? I feel every day I am talking to a friend who is going through that in every industry, and that has become sort of commonplace. And I think in an AI world, it's going to keep happening. And so what I would actually say is I'd lean into that idea and then take control of like, then if this is going to happen, what do I want from it? And I love Morgan's suggestions around the sticky notes of like, what are my other interests? I'm also incredibly biased. I change full industries every like 10 years. I'm like, oh, new industry, here we go. And so if you're going to change, I would make a change and I would be open about that. And if you're going to stay in the same industry, I would do that, but I also would be open about that. And so my advice would really be, as you begin networking, I would lead with the vulnerability, because I actually think it'll be a place of connection for a lot of people right now. And that everyone in America, in my opinion, is going through reinvention of themselves in some shape or form. Everyone's thinking about how they reinvent themselves. And I would lead with that because that's essentially the opportunity you have in front of you now.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Great. Anybody else have a question before we close out this amazing panel and take all their nuggets of wisdom with us? I have one I'd like to throw out there. If you don't know someone, and I think Trey, you mentioned this when you and I were chatting originally about this session, and you try to connect with them online, how does that look versus in person, like that connection online when you haven't met them yet? How do you do that successfully, or what are some tips about that?
Yeah, I mean, I will also pivot a little bit to Drew because we were actually pre-talking about this before we got on here. So I'll let Drew answer that first and then I'll close us out.
Yeah, I think there's not one size fits all, right? Depends on the person, who they are, what are sort of platforms or areas they gravitate towards more. What I wouldn't do, we talked about do's and don'ts earlier, is text them, email their work and personal email, and slide into their LinkedIn DMs and send them a Facebook request. I wouldn't do that. But it depends on the setting, right? If I'm we just had our Duke Welcome to the City party here in New York, and it was a more casual setting. And so I exchanged phone numbers with a lot of people. Versus if I'm at a corporate event, I know that it's first out last at that company's whatever. And so I actually don't even need to ask them. And I say, oh yeah, I'll definitely like be in touch. And it's sort of understood that through their corporate email, sort of most appropriate for that situation, but open to other ideas other people have.
No, I
That's
think
great.
that's great. And I think we have one more in the chat here. Yvonne, is that right? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just so that folks have it here, the question is for those of us who are more introverted / need time to recharge and value authenticity, what other tips do you recommend for networking? My very first thing I would say is, and then I'll open it up to the panel. I would quickly say, number one, if you're an introverted person, you need to do what Morgan talked about, which is think in steps. And you heard Drew and Harsh also mention this, which is networking is a long-term, it's constantly happening, right? It's not a sort of a journey where you start and stop. But instead, you really want to have multiple touch points with people, particularly when you don't necessarily need something. So Yvonne, what I would really say to that is, if as an introverted person, what I try to think about is, how am I building connections again before there's ever an ask, and thinking how Morgan mentioned, which is sharing what I'm working on, building actual like relationships and just seeing what they're working on, getting curious about their lives. I would actually spend more of my energy and time into the other person. Or what you heard Harsh getting at, which is I would be networking in a place where I know I have a lot of value, right? And so opening yourself and bringing yourself as an introvert into spaces where you don't have to lean on your personality to be super extroverted, but instead lean on your skill set, and just know that, hey, I'm really good at giving pitch deck advice because I used to do that work before. And so I'm going to offer that up to people and just help them out. Or Morgan was at the Whitney, you said, right? Or
Yeah.
at one of the museums, right? And so what a great way to insert yourself where you have a controlled environment around the type of relationships you have, but still be really open to meeting people.
Mm-hmm. And one more quick thing I would add is genuinely ask things you're interested in. Don't feel like there's something you have to make up or affront or whatever. And if you're genuinely interested in it, I guarantee you it'll be an interesting conversation, at least for one of the two people.
And then maybe one more thing I'll add there. There's one more way to do networking, which I was talking to someone who writes his climate newsletter, and he was kind of telling this to me. But what he said is, if I could choose between going to an event and putting out an interesting article, I would put out an interesting article, because then the cool people reach out to me. And so if you're introverted, but like you have a niche interest that you think you have a unique insight about, share that on LinkedIn, right? Like send it out on Instagram, like whatever your channel is, but put some like interesting insights out there. And I guarantee someone's going to read it, someone's going to find it interesting, and they'll just reach out to you.
Great. And on that note, I have a few friends where our relationship exists via just sending each other like urban planning TikToks or Twitter threads, book recommendations. We don't talk about anything else. I hardly know what's happening in their lives, but that's the way that we connect, and that's like created our bond over years. And so I have different friends with a niche interest, and we'll just go back and forth that way, just sharing really interesting factoids about whatever the two of us enjoy. And I think that's a great way to like continue like a relationship over time as well. And it's fun.
Fantastic. Well, and I know we're hitting time here, so I want to be respectful of everyone's evenings. I want to first thank the panelists, and I know, again, Wednesday night, and they said I wouldn't be anywhere else. And it was great to meet you all and spend some time. I feel like I really learned a lot from each of you, and just the perspective each of you are bringing for where you are today and where you've come from as well, from a networking perspective, has been fantastic. So thank you. And thank you to Anne and Xavier and the full Duke team as well for all the help behind the scenes and getting us here and making sure this actually worked. I can barely log into my computer every day, and so they've somehow made sure that I've appeared here. And then the last thing I'll say is for all of you, right? I think at the end of the day, what we really want to have is a genuine conversation about making genuine relationships. And ideally, hopefully, the takeaway that everyone kind of walks away from is that authenticity is, you just got to start. And it's less sort of like forcing it to feel authentic, and more to Harsh's point, is finding your people and being yourself, right? And I would look for who is moving at your frequency. And then the same thing from a networking perspective is, at the end of the day, networking is an ongoing forever thing. And if you continue to stay curious, you will always have the ability to open up and build your network. And then some of the intention you heard the panelists talking about is inserting yourself in places to continue doing that where it would be harder to do if you were at home. Right. And so at the end of the day, Anne, you asked the question about being online. I am a firm believer you just got to get outside. And you're going to have to meet some people, which is why I was sort of asking that sort of COVID question, because I think at the end of the day, my biggest giveaway that I would give all of you is find places where it's natural to speak to people in person. And so I think Erica put in there community service events, religious events, Duke events, any of those places. And it's much better to sort of awkwardly fumble your way through the thing, but have done it, than to not. So thank you all. And I'll turn it to Anne if there's anything else we need to do to close us out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Harsh, for a great session, and to our audience for joining us this evening. Thank you.